how do you know when a feature is done?
Ooh, that's a good one. When it passes all of the BDD tests.
Yeah, okay. My answer is it's never done because it's always going to break. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am so excited to chat with my good friend and I guess former colleague and colleague sort of again, Lee from the recently launched Atomic.dev. Many of you are going to be familiar with his work as Global Field CTO at GitLab or his time at GitHub where we got to work together. He's had a long career in tech. We'll dig into that. He has worked on so many of the technologies that we all use when we're building software. And he recently announced Atomic, and Vermilion is a very, very excited investor. Welcome, Lee. It's so good to see you.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm really excited to be here. Been doing sort of a road show of talking to different people and explaining what we're building, and really excited to have this conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, I know a lot about you and your background, and every time we talk, I learn something new, I think. It's like, oh, you were involved in that. That's incredible. But for everyone else, give us a TLDR. What have you been working on throughout your career?
Sure. So I started off my career by accident in software.
Yeah.
I actually ended up with a computer science degree because I didn't want to take too many math credits. And so when I got out of college, I ended up becoming a teacher, and I got to teach Turbo Pascal, C++ to high school students. I was learning on the fly. That's one of the things about this industry that I think is so amazing is there's always so much to learn. So that's one of the things about me is throughout my career, I've sort of bounced around from the development side to the operations side. And that led me into a bunch of really cool startups. I worked at TogetherSoft for a while, where I was doing a lot of developer productivity around UML and being able to think about how we visualize the architectures that we're building. Into time at CompuWare and at Red Hat. Red Hat had an amazing time, had an amazing team. We were building sort of the first open source marketplace under Red Hat Exchange. Throughout that time, I ended up going and meeting a lot of really great open source people, and always been pulling back into open source. And that even took me into a point where I had the opportunity to go work as a consultant for a number of Fortune 500 companies. I ran my own consulting company for about 5 years, doing a lot of cloud migrations, app modernization type projects. And that's where I ended up meeting the team at GitHub. And they convinced me to leave the ownership world and move me back into a W-2 employee again, and got to got to really talk to a lot of great communities about how they were using GitHub and how they were thinking about open source, and learned a lot from the people that I worked with. So recently, I just left GitLab. My time at GitLab had an amazing group that I worked with underneath the field CTO team, meeting a lot of executives, understanding what their challenges are, what business problems they're trying to solve for. And over the last 2 years, it's been a whirlwind. It's been chaotic. And that's where Atomic came about.
Yep. I mean, you've spent a lot of time inside all the systems that Atomic is rethinking. You mentioned GitHub and GitLab, but even beyond that, when did you start to see this shift, right? Like we see the shift every, I think, 10 years and how we build software. It's kind of how I've mapped it out. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, what's interesting is I saw some of this shift during COVID. When people started working remotely and they were forced to work remotely. When we think about how pull requests worked and branches worked, and we did virtual stand ups and things like that, there were already some cracks starting to form. And I ended up meeting a gentleman probably about a year into my time at GitLab. My boss at GitLab, we were looking at some different solutions for some different customers. And we found this project called Pull. And I started digging into it. My degree in math and computer science, like I started just wigging out. I'm like, this is amazing the way that he thought about patch theory and thought about all these different ways that you could assemble semantic differences in source code. And uh, at the time, Git was good enough. Even though there were some cracks, it was like, who wants to take on Git? And now in the world of AI, it started really ramping up where people were struggling with what is this new workflow going to be when I have this co-pilot or this teammate that is now generating a lot of this code for me. And those workflows started breaking down. Things as we started thinking about developer productivity. Sure, developer productivity is awesome. It's only one measurement when we talk about building software. So that whole workflow has to change.
Yeah, and I see it. Like, I obviously am not in code every day anymore. I looked at my GitHub graph the other day, I was sad because there's just, like, nothing for years. You'll see where I was, like, building the website for the fun, and then it just stops, and so I gotta start picking up that again because I really miss it. But, talk to me a bit about, like, during COVID, I agree everyone was forced to go remote. I think you and I have enjoyed being remote before anyone anyone else in life. But there definitely was a paradigm shift that started, and we saw AI kind of creeping up. Talk a bit about how, Atomic is approaching that differently and how you build software differently. And why do you think, I know we've talked about it offline, that like Git starts to break with AI. Like talk a bit about that as well.
Yeah. So if we think about how Git is architected, I'm going to simplify this a lot. So please, those people that are really deep in the weeds, the core contributors to Git, please don't come after me for this. This is for the general audience to think about how this is different than how Git works. But let's take a scenario where you've got a picture and you now have another picture of the same area that's sort of overlaid on top of it. Well, if you could see through from the top down, you'd be able to see where the differences are. So there might be some colors, maybe the trees have bloomed and the old picture was in the snow, the new picture. So you'd be able to see where the differences are pretty easily between those. Well, if we start to think about, well, what if all of a sudden I've got 1,000 of those pictures and I'm looking at them from the top down? Would you still be able to see clearly between those two if you now layered another 998 on top of it? It would really be hard to figure out where those differences are. So when we start to think about these AI agents that are out there running around the globe, and you see these demos on TikTok and on YouTube and all these other things, and look, I've now got just hired my 25-person engineering team, and it's just a bunch of agents out writing the code. Well, let's break this down mathematically. If you are, we saw a lot of this at GitHub and at GitLab. Is if I've got 1,000 engineers, so even before AI, and I go ahead and I'm being tasked to solve three problems a day. So three branches, that's 3,000 a day. So now over most pull requests, minimum, they're going to be open for 3 days. So now you've got 9,000 items sitting inside your project waiting to be approved for those changes to end up going and making it into production. You start talking about large enterprises where they got 40, 50, 100,000 employees, man, like that's a challenge right there. And Git doesn't scale above like, yeah, you can get past some of the soft limits at 5 gig and 10 gig and repo size, but you start to have some performance issues that start to pop up from that. Well, now let's think about what happens if I now give all 1,000 of those employees 100 agents. So now I'm building that stack of pictures. And when those agents can't see in every other branch or in every other work tree, they can't see what every other agent's working on. So you're going to end up with a lot of duplicate code. And Git is not great at merging that code back together. So Atomic, think about this. This is the thing that I have to tell people. I'm like, don't try to compare this to Git. It is completely different. So let's think like we've got Lego blocks, and the Lego blocks, I've got a red one and I've got a green one. So the red one knows that it is the predecessor to green, and green knows that there's a link to red. Well, let's say I now have a change. And when I have a change and I want to insert a yellow block, when I insert that yellow block in between, it knows that it is now going to be in between red and green. Specifically, mathematically, it knows what its dependencies are. So as you go down that path and you start to think about now, I've got 1,000 developers. Well, if I've got 1,000 developers inserting code, I can automatically determine where inside of those blocks what they depend on. Because I know what they depend on, I always have a clean state of that repository of any given time. So when you start to think about adding in 1,000 developers with 100 agents each agent can still go ahead and work. You can teach those agents how to use Atomic so they're inserting things and they commute automatically between them. Well, that's fine if we're always adding things to the end or if we're already always adding things like right in the middle. But what happens if I've got a scenario where I've got my red and my green and somebody, let's say Alice comes in and wants to add purple and Bob wants to come in and add in yellow. Well, they're both coming in. They both want red and green. They both want to insert in between the two of them. Well, the way that patch theory works is I can insert them in what order no matter what. They commute. So all I need to do is determine which one goes first and which one comes second. So as a team lead or as an engineer, I can go in and say, Alice's needs to go first, and then Bob's going to come in second. Well, because I know at that point in time that they want to know who their predecessor, where they're linking inside that tree, well, if I do have a conflict, I'm going to know then that I have a conflict. So I can resolve that conflict up front
Yep.
rather than me waiting for 20 other commits somewhere else down inside a tree and then trying to overlay that on top of it. So Atomic comes at this a lot differently just from a fundamental mathematical perspective. And what Pierre did with Pahul was a great foundation for us.
Yeah.
So I've spent a lot of time over the last 18 months really digging into that code base and then taking other mathematical theory and what I've learned about how clear case worked and how the SVN worked and how CVS worked and then how Git worked and trying to take the best of each one of those and then building that into what is now the Atomic code base.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you make the distinction that, like, Atomic is just not AI for Git. You're rebuilding how anyone should be building software in this new AI forward world. Um, and it has to happen because I the idea of a merge conflict with 1,000 developers with 1,000 agents is a nightmare. Like, that just never is going to get, that will never see production. That will never see the light of day. And just from a security standpoint alone, like, that's not going to happen. You and I both know that. We worked in big corps. And I also like that you called out how you're thinking kind of how open source software is playing into this. And so if you could talk a bit more how you see open source kind of overlapping with Atomic.
Yeah, so I had a, doing a startup is fun.
Yeah.
It's also there's also a lot of people that you get introduced to, and I had a really good conversation with an open source attorney, and we had this conversation. And uh, like, do you close source it? Do you open source it? If you open source it, what license do you want to use? Well, because we're extending Pahul, we're sticking to their license. Now, we can always append the copyright to say we are using their code plus our code. So there's an extension of the copyright, but we are extending the license because GPL v2, there is a schema for the database that needs to hold the rigor for the math to math. So if we just openly went out there and let somebody go ahead and close, if we were doing this closed source, we couldn't get any sort of independent validation that it's actually doing what we want it to do. So going down the open source path, right now it is me and hiring in to bring in other people, and I want the community to be involved because that to me is where innovation really comes about. So I wanted to make sure that number one, we get open source people to come in, play with it, help us find where the math maybe doesn't math,
Yep.
but at the same time being able to come in and say, what other innovations do you want to put in? So like one of the key innovations that we are putting into the open source that I've had a lot of people tell me that should you want to close source that? And I'm like, no, this needs to go in
Charge
the
money
open.
for that, Lee. We gotta.
What we're able to do is at the change record level, when you're using something like Claude Code or Copilot or Open Code, what we're able to do is able to store AI provenance. So this is something that has come up in Reddit posts, in X, and here, you got an open source. So like I know I've watched a lot of stuff like from Mitchell Hashimoto
Mhm.
from HashiCorp. Mitchell and I have had a number of conversations previously, and I've kind of been biting my tongue before I reach out to him and say, you need to check out what I'm building, because with Ghosty, what he's building right now, he's like, I've got my agents MD, everything else, but I really want my pull request. I want to be able to see what model you used. I want to be able to see what the prompt was. Like, if I could have that data, then that helps me do my review. I might be able to move a lot faster. But I sort of have these blinders on. I don't know. Did you write this code yourself? Did Claude help you? Did you spend 10 minutes prompting this and vibe coding a solution? Or is this something that you really thought about? And there were a number of prompts and there's a number of commits associated with it. So that's what we want to build into Atomic is, you start to use other open source tools. We can start to capture the AI provenance. Now, when you're going in, you can have different workflows based on what sort of metadata is actually stored inside the change record.
Yeah, and I think the change record piece is so interesting in the, like, having the AI provenance, because you and I both know this, any enterprise corp is going to have that data, and this kinda ties into what I wanna talk about a bit more is, I love open source. I have worked in it for a very long time. A lot of my portfolio are open source projects that have, someone's built a monetization layer on it, but enterprises get stressed out sometimes when they're using a lot of open source in their software, and we've seen that our entire careers. It's more normalized now, but you spent your entire career talking to large regulated enterprises, and I know that they have different worries than like someone just building, vibe coding something on the side, right? What are you seeing when you're chatting with people that are leading large engineering teams? What are they worried about?
What's very interesting is, you know, in the startup world, very rarely do you get to go talk to the CTO, go talk to the VP of engineering. It's usually somebody found your post on X or in Reddit or on Discord, and they're like, hey, I really want to have a conversation with you. So you're sort of taking a whole bunch of conversations, trying to move up the stack until you can get to somebody who actually has buying power. As soon as we start talking to people about AI provenance and observability, like, I'm going immediately to a VP of engineering, immediately to a VP of operations, immediately to the CISO. And they at least want to know where we're going, because maybe it's not a purchase right now, but we need to make sure that, how are you thinking about the problem? Does that align with our vision about how we want to align to that problem? And when we have the conversation, I am finding out that a lot of these large organizations are really nervous about what's going to happen the first time that there is an incident. So, hey, just wanted to let you know that XYZ Acme Corporation just leaked 10 million, social security numbers out on the internet. And could you go back? And there's all kinds of things that we have been talking about with Salsa and other things for being able to build provenance and stuff around deployments. But could you actually go back to be able to look at that piece of code and say, was that written by a human? Was it written by AI? If it was written by AI, what was the prompt that generated that code? If it ended up going through a security process, who was the reviewer? Did AI review the code or did a human review the code? All of those things are now becoming critical to people adopting AI. So the large enterprises I'm talking to, they're trying everything right now. They're giving their engineers or giving them sort of a library of tools that they can choose from. And they're saying, check it out for 3 months, go off and tell us what you like, what you didn't like, things like that. Well, now they're starting to realize that they want to have real data associated with the tools that they're using, and just putting it into a database somewhere where, if I'm using one vendor's product, all that data is just going to be in that vendor's database. Where then they go choose another vendor, well, then that data is in that vendor's database. And the two of them aren't collecting the same data. So then you can't actually compare apples to apples. So when we can say that we can store it at the change record level and then extract that data and show you, doesn't matter what tool it was. It doesn't matter what database it's being stored in because it's now going to be in that change record for eternity.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I'm always asking go to market questions because it's where I've spent all of my career. Uh, do you see this being something that is pulled in bottoms up from the developer community, or do you think it's going to come in top down from risk and security? Is it both? Is it someone else? Like, where do you see the drive coming from?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the size of the company.
Yeah, smart.
So if you're SMB mid-market minus, it's probably going to be something organic. It's probably going to be driven by cost. If you're in one of those, let's say you're a small healthcare company or you're going to have regulations. I've already talked to a bunch of friends of mine that they're like, how quickly can you get on the government contracting list? Because this is something they're being asked from DOD, from other federal agencies. So it's those types of smaller businesses who are going to have to provide that type of attribution to be able to say that this, hey, I want to let you know I'm a contractor. We came in, we did this work, and you want to be able to validate that we actually did the work. You want to be able to know if they just prompted that code or if they
Yeah.
actually wrote the code. And then as you start getting into larger enterprises, I think you're going to see a lot of CISOs, you're going to have a lot of VPs of engineering because when we start to think about, we're already seeing different organizations where they sort of jumped the gun and they said, oh, you know what, I can get rid of 4,000 engineers because AI will be able to go do all of their work. And then they started realizing that, oh, you know what, it can't handle the context windows. Now we're doing a lot of this work before and after the change. And those people want to be able to track things a lot differently than those small business, mid market minus type companies. So the mid market plus to enterprise, they're going to have a different use case, I think. So the go to market for them is probably going to look a little bit differently and who will target for being able to showcase what we're building.
I think that's right. And then I think you're from open source perspective, I think the contributors will be from all, which is what I love about open source is the communities are composed of people from every single type of company,
Absolutely.
which is great. So, the next 10 years in software collaboration, we've lived a few cycles. The future is exciting. We have some new fun tools to use. I think is big inflection point as we all know. How do you think technical founders should think differently about building infra for these human developers interacting with AI agents to build code?
Yeah. One of the biggest things that I am seeing a shift right now is the software development process is always linear. So you go to your stand up meeting, you go ahead, here's the task that you're going to work on, you take your Jira ticket, you go ahead, even if you're using AI, you're writing your unit tests, you're writing your code, and that process goes sort of from left to right. That's going to break. You're going to be context switching a lot.
Right.
And one of the items that I have been building for about 10 years that I'm sort of bringing back as something that I'm calling Circuit Breaker. And Circuit Breaker allows us to bring mini pipelines to the desktop. So, too many times when we think about building linearly, it's fine because we go write our code, we do our local tasks, whatever, but then when we push, we then have a platform engineering team, a DevOps team, whatever you want to call them. They're building pipelines, and then you sort of go off and go do your next task while that pipeline runs. That pipeline might sit in a queue. It might take an hour. It might take a day. And then once you get your feedback, then you come back in, and then the next day you go pick up that task based on the errors. You go fix those errors. You push again. You wait for that. So there's sort of this always coming back to the beginning and then going back again. What Atomic and Circuit Breaker, when you put those two things together, is when I'm talking to UX people, and I'm like, imagine this world where you've got like a Slack like interface. And in that Slack like interface, every time you've got a change that you need to implement, it creates a new channel automatically on the fly. It brings in all the humans who have input into that channel. You then have agents that start to kick off based on the change that you're going to implement. And as you start prompting and start asking questions, start digging into it, it knows what that workflow needs to be based on the type of change that you're trying to implement, based on the type of project that you're currently in. So if I'm in a maintenance project, I've got one type of workflow. If this is a new project that's production, I would have a different workflow. If this is R&D, I might have a different workflow. But these agents would automatically know based on that workflow what needs to happen. Well, now as I'm making these changes, what at the end of every time you make a call to an LLM, there's always this statement that always comes back that says done. That's your new post receive hook where you triggered your pipelines out in GitLab or in GitHub.
Right.
That done locally, once you've executed that LLM, that's now going to trigger all of your agents to say, I now need to go check the code quality. I need to go check the security. I need to go run my code coverage metrics. All of that's going to happen in some hybrid cloud type model between your local workstation and whoever your cloud provider is. And as we get that data, it's going to be kicking off more agents. So you're going to have this network or mesh of agents that are going to be running. And this is going to be your control plane. And you're going to move between changes as one's executing, they're going off and doing things. You might go to a different change that you were working on yesterday, or it might be the next change that you want to start working on. I was at a potential design partner last week, and because of their industry, I said, think about it this way. You are going to end up becoming an air traffic controller and planes are your agents. So he was like, you're absolutely right. He was like, this is what we see too. This is where it's going to end up going to. But the thing that I think about is having two daughters, one in college, one that just graduated from college, knowing how short their attention span is. I actually think this is going to be good. Because now we're going to end up in this situation where they are constantly context switching and they're going to be moving back and forth. And these agents are going to be sort of be lining up their tasks for them and say, you now need to go do this, you now need to go do that. And so these kinds of things, as we're moving fast, it's not one of these things that I don't see this as so much of we're increasing developer productivity. We're removing a lot of middle management from telling us what we need to build next, or
Right.
what issues, like what security issues, what critical things need to be solved before we go into production, because it's going to be sitting on my desktop. It's going to be something I'm going to interact with on a day-to-day basis. That's where I think the next 10 years is going, is we're going to see more and more companies not just building LLM wrappers. They're going to be thinking about, like, not just from building enterprise software, but they're going to be thinking about new user experiences where we're sort of interacting with these things all the time.
Yeah, that gets me excited. I mean, I think everyone has a very short attention span. I don't have a very long attention span anymore. TikTok has ruined my ability to focus on anything for more than, 5 to 12 seconds, depending on if it's a cute dog or not. But I'm excited about building. Like, I'm excited about what's next and how we build software. And you've seen some cycles. What advice would you give to people who are building, who feel the foundational shifts coming, but aren't quite sure what to do?
Yeah, AI has removed a lot of barriers to entry. Syntax is no longer something that you have to go read a book or go to college for anymore. So don't be afraid to break glass. Don't be afraid to try new things. It's not one of these things that we got to sit back and be like, oh, I need to make sure that I do X, Y, Z in this order, because if I don't, then things will break. Well, then just go fix them. Right? Hand off an agent and say, go read this code. Tell me what you think is wrong with it. Let's have a conversation, figure out how to make it better, and then make it reusable. Do a lot of these things. The other thing that I tell people is we need to stop thinking about this linear progression of change. And if we think about it, it's more like an hourglass. So what we're doing now is we're spending a lot more time trying to understand the problem, and then making sure that we're feeding it the right context, make sure we're feeding it the right prompt, because the syntax is coming down to, it's cheap to write code now. But then what we need to do is the hourglass comes down at the back to be able to say, did it actually generate what I wanted? Am I okay pushing this into production? Am I willing to sign off on this change? And so as you start to think about this, think about what role you think you're going to play either in the beginning or in the end. I'm also seeing like even going ahead as, working with you and Yoni, and we've been having conversations like I've really struggled a little bit about what sort of job recs would I put up on the website?
Yeah,
Because I'm like, are you still a full stack engineer or is your role something different?
right.
Right? Are you a product manager or is your role something different? Are we going to redefine all of these things? Like I had a really good friend of mine when I was at TogetherSoft. Uh, I love this idea. I don't know if we'll implement it this way, but we had these things called Code Certified Mentors. So Peter Code was the CEO, so it was COAD, but we called ourselves mentors, and we did a little bit of everything. We would jump on the phones and help out on support. We would go and consult with the customer. We would sit down and write code and build integrations into the core product line, but you were a mentor and you mentored other people inside the company. And then we also saw us as mentoring sort of the code as the code was organic. It had its own life. And we tried to tell other people, your code has its own life and it's going to grow organically over time and how you manage it and how you feed it, all those things. So you need to have a mentor. And we would basically hand off and say, okay, we've mentored you. It's now your job to mentor others inside your organization. Is that going to be, are we just going to have knowledge workers and mentors? Or is that sort of how we're going to end up? You're going to fit in one of those two categories. And I talked to an HR person a few months back, and one of the conversations I said, man, how cool would it be if you had knowledge workers and mentors, and then you had badges? So like there were just certain things that you are a specialist in. So if I needed a mentor who knew Rust, I would earn a Rust badge, but I would be a mentor and we would train everybody to have a common set of capabilities as a mentor, common set of capabilities as a knowledge worker. And I'm sure that there's probably somebody will come along and say there's probably 10 more other categories of those. But that's just how I think about it in my head.
I mean, I think something I've always admired about you is that you have this really interesting imagination, but you know how to implement it. Because some people are like always in the sky, and some people are builders, and you've always been able to like seamlessly blend both. I think, and I always appreciate watching you work because of that. So thanks for chatting about deeply technical things. I do want to change gears a little bit and do a lightning round where I, ask silly questions that are short and expect short, silly answers, although some of them are actual work questions. So I'm just going to get started. Um, what is one thing in your tech stack that you'll never compromise on? Yeah, yeah, of course. One tool or product that you wish existed but doesn't yet.
Uh, Something that when I sleep, it could just extract my thoughts at night and then give me a dump in the morning of everything that I thought about at night.
Yeah, that would be good. No, I dream all night. I don't think about work. What are you doing? Yeah. What's the latest technical problem that really frustrated you?
Mm, Docker Compose.
Uh,
So having multiple different projects, like when it's not in a mono repo,
mhm.
getting Docker Compose to act nicely when there's multiple repos is hard.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. First thing that made you feel like a real builder.
I would say when I was at TogetherSoft, um, I got to build the virtual file system for version control. And I built an integration. I reverse engineered the APIs for ClearCase
Yeah.
for a customer. And it was one of those things that somebody told me it couldn't be done. And when I took it to the customer and demoed it, yeah, I left that meeting feeling like a builder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is what I was saying, where you have a big imagination, but you can actually implement it, which I think answers my next question, but you can answer it your own way. What's your unfair advantage as a founder?
I would say it's being able to think about things across the entire
Yeah.
business.
Yep.
Like somebody needs help on the technical side, I can provide guidance on the technical side. And I think that's part of my teaching background.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn. And at the same time, I also love to share.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of work on the business side, the sales side, go-to-market side, marketing side that, I'm not always the best. I'm joking. I'm working with a branding guy, Brandon from Branding is what I say. We joke about that all the time. But one of the things I told him is I said, look, launching the initial version of the website is sort of my front page version of being able to get the website up and going, just so people know what we're building. But we're talking about what, version 1.1 looks like and what version 1.5 looks like. And that's something that I love to be able to see is what that progression looks like over time.
Yep. How do you know when a feature is done?
Oh, that's a good one. When it passes all of the BDD tests.
Yeah. Okay. My answer is it's never done because it's always going to break. I just assume everything that I make will break because don't let me touch software ever. Your most overrated advice that you hear in tech circles?
um, that if you give it enough time, everything is solvable.
Yeah. Underrated advice that you hear.
To not be afraid to fail.
Yes, totally. I think a fear to fail keeps everyone from trying things all of the time. So I agree with that one. What was your worst startup idea?
Uh, Worst startup idea. Um, oh, there's been so many. Um, well, not ones that I've tried to take, but ones that I would sit
Right.
there and I'd go at like after a couple bourbons, sure, with a friend and be like, they're like, what are you
We
talking
have to buy
about?
the URL right now.
Um, uh, it will, we had talked about building a way to be able to invert the sales funnel.
Oh,
So, using technology to be able to invert the sales funnel, and it was one of those things that we immediately went out and grabbed the domain, and then we started thinking about what that would look like, and we're like, That'll never work."
I don't
But I
think.
still have the domain name,
Well, maybe we'll use it. What was the first concert you went to?
Chicago.
Oh, yes. Okay. Last concert, most recent one.
Uh, Luke Bryan.
Okay. Your favorite analog hobby or activity?
Golf.
I could have answered that. I knew it was golf. What is your favorite season?
Fall.
Fall. Same. All right. Well, it was so good to see you. As always, I enjoy our chats. I always learn something. And I'm really excited to work on this with you. I know we're just getting started. You've just announced the pre-seed, so congratulations on raising that. You've got some open roles. What are you hiring for right now?
Yeah, so hiring for some full stack engineers. Really looking if somebody can sit there and envision what I talked about around the Slack UI, UX, looking for somebody on the UI, UX side. Also needs to be a coder. I don't want somebody who's just going to sit in Figma all day. I want somebody who can actually write some code. And then calling the role head of finance and ops.
Yep.
So somebody who can help me as we hire and we grow, making sure, bills are getting paid, expenses getting paid, all of those
The
things.
operational stuff. I'm terrible at that
Exactly.
part. I just hired someone just now. I'm like, please help me with all of this because I will not do it. Well, as always, lovely to see you. Excited that we got to chat and let's go.
Thanks, Ashley.
Yep.